It was just after 6 when I kicked off my heels and dropped onto the living room rug beside my son. His toy trucks were lined up like soldiers, the only order left in my day. The house smelled faintly of pasta sauce and exhaustion. I had one quiet minute before the front door opened without a knock. Millie's voice carried through the hallway, cheerful but sharp. She called out that she hoped it was okay she brought the girls, then her daughters ran in like a storm, scattering blocks and muddy shoes across the carpet. My son froze, then followed them with wide eyes, not sure if he should join the chaos or protect his tower. Millie appeared in the kitchen as if she owned it, setting her purse on the counter and opening the fridge. She frowned at the shelves and said we needed more snacks, maybe chicken or protein pies. I said I'd make something, even though dinner wasn't part of my plan. She smiled, grateful but careless, and dropped onto the couch with her shoes still on. She started chatting about how much her husband sacrificed for mine, how lucky we were, how family owed family. Her words floated through the house like perfume that wouldn't fade. I kept cooking, telling myself it was easier not to argue. But as I stirred the pan, I felt something settle heavily in my chest. Gratitude, I realized, can sound a lot like obedience when it's spoken by someone who never says thank you. When Matthew was 20, their father died suddenly of a heart attack. The family business collapsed within months, and his older brother Emmett left college to take 2 jobs, working nights at a warehouse and weekends at a repair shop. He sent Matthew money every month, enough to cover rent, textbooks, and tuition. By the time Matthew graduated, the total was close to $47,000. Everyone in the family called it the ultimate act of loyalty, the kind of sacrifice people wrote about in old moral stories. At their wedding, Matthew thanked his brother in front of everyone, voice trembling, eyes wet. He said he owed his life to Emmett. It was a beautiful moment, one that made every guest tear up. But that sentence followed us home. It showed up in Millie's smiles, in the way she'd tilt her head and remind me how much her husband gave up for ours. Each favor she asked carried the same unspoken message. You owe us. At first I didn't mind helping. Gratitude made me want to give back. I baked for their kids' birthdays, brought food when Millie was sick, watched her girls after school. But over time, the giving felt less like choice and more like duty. Every dinner I hosted, every weekend I spent cooking for her parties, felt like paying interest on a debt I never signed for. I started to see how Emmett's generosity had been repackaged into a moral leash, one that Millie used with perfect precision. She didn't need to raise her voice. The story of Emmett's sacrifice was enough to silence any protest. Gratitude was supposed to connect people. Instead, it became currency, traded quietly for control, until kindness no longer felt like kindness at all. Millie's requests started small and polite. She needed cupcakes for the preschool bake sale or a few trays of pasta for her husband's coworkers. Then the lists grew longer and the tone changed from asking to expecting. Every few weeks I'd get a message about another family dinner or holiday gathering. Each one cost me between $300 and $500 for groceries, wine, and decorations. Millie would take the dishes I prepared, post them online, and thank everyone for complimenting her cooking. Her captions always read something like another successful family night, proud to feed the people we love. My name never appeared. When I brought it up to Matthew, he smiled like I was overthinking it. He said it was just family duty, that helping out was what good relatives did. I told him I was fine helping, but not when it meant spending hours in the kitchen while someone else took the credit. He shrugged and said Millie just wanted things to look perfect for Emmett's friends. That word perfect echoed in my head for days. It was never about family. It was about performance. I started to notice how much I was giving away without realizing it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics once said the average American family spends over $700 a year on gifts and social events. I was spending nearly that much every month, all for the sake of keeping peace. Silence felt cheaper than conflict, but it came with a hidden price. Every time I said yes, a little piece of my time and pride disappeared. I began saving receipts, not because I planned to confront anyone, but because I needed proof that I wasn't imagining the cost of my own kindness. It was survival, not bookkeeping. Millie showed up on a Wednesday afternoon with a bright smile and a bottle of cheap wine. She perched on my counter like she owned it, saying she had big news. Uncle Frank was visiting, the whole family was coming, and she wanted me to cook dinner for 12. She started listing dishes as if she were reading from a menu, her voice sweet but commanding. Prime rib, rosemary potatoes, her favorite tartlets. I let her finish before saying the meat alone would cost $200. She blinked, then laughed softly, calling me funny for counting receipts after everything her husband had done for mine. The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't anger that rose in me, but clarity. Gratitude, once a symbol of love, had turned into a currency she used to buy my silence. I stood at the sink, running cold water over my hands, watching it spill into the drain. Millie kept talking about family and appearances, her tone light as sugar. I said nothing. The silence stretched long enough for her to look uneasy, but I stayed still. Calm in a way I hadn't been in years. That night, when the house went quiet, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't planning revenge or a scene. I was planning to stop playing along. Gratitude should never be measured in obedience. It was time to separate kindness from control and take back the small, unseen pieces of myself I had been giving away. I spent the next few evenings at the dining table with a calculator, a notebook, and a cup of cold coffee. Every event, every meal, every errand I had covered for Millie was listed line by line. Groceries, wine, party favors, centerpieces, even the babysitter fees. The total came to $5,732. Seeing it on paper felt heavier than I expected, not because of the money but because of how invisible it had all been. I typed it neatly into a spreadsheet, added dates and short notes beside each expense, and titled the file, The Family Ledger. When it was finished, I drafted a short email to Emmett. It was polite and steady, almost clinical. I told him I appreciated what he had once done for Matthew, but gratitude should not be one-sided or permanent. I attached the ledger and ended with a line that said sometimes fairness begins with clarity. I reread it twice before sending it, not for courage but precision. The truth deserved to be presented cleanly, without drama. In the days before the dinner, I cooked the dishes Millie requested. Each one had a small card tucked beside it with my initials written neatly. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, lemon tartlets, all labeled prepared by Claire M. I positioned my phone in the corner of the kitchen, voice recorder on, not to catch a fight but to capture patterns. People like Millie never feared confrontation. They thrived on it. What they feared was evidence. The night before the dinner, I checked everything twice. Recipes printed, receipts filed, camera tested. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, like someone preparing for an audit instead of a battle. I wasn't looking for revenge or apology. I was looking for accountability, the quiet kind that doesn't shout but stays written in ink long after excuses fade. Millie's dining room glowed with soft light and polished silver. The table was set like something from a magazine, tall candles flickering between crystal glasses. The air smelled of rosemary and butter, rich and warm. Guests drifted in with compliments, and Millie floated among them, smiling wide, greeting each one like royalty. I stayed in the kitchen, plating the dishes I had spent hours preparing. My name card sat beside each plate, small and discreet, just enough to be seen. When I carried the roast to the table, Millie followed close behind, whispering that I could head home now, that it would be less confusing if I wasn't there. I told her the meal wasn't finished yet. Her smile faltered, just a hint, before she straightened her shoulders and said her husband liked things perfect. I looked at her and said Emmett already knows. Her face went pale, like the words had pulled the air from the room. For a moment, the sound of laughter from the guests covered the silence between us. Then Emmett appeared in the doorway, a folder in his hand. The conversation at the table softened as he stepped closer. He held the printed ledger, the one I had sent him, and his eyes looked tired but clear. He said he had checked every receipt and every note, and it was true. Millie's posture stiffened, her hand frozen on the back of a chair. No one spoke. Emmett placed the folder on the table beside the roast, its edges brushing against the linen runner. One by one, the guests found excuses to leave. The house grew quieter with every closing door until only the sound of the candles flickering remained. I gathered my apron and looked once more at Millie, still standing in her perfect dining room. "Debt," I said softly, "should never be recycled into control." Then I left her there with the truth and the silence she had always feared most. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail with Emmett's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a short note and a check that matched every dollar I had spent over the years. He wrote that fairness was long overdue and that he was sorry for not seeing what had been taken in his name. Millie's social pages went silent, her curated perfection replaced by absence. No one needed to announce her fall. People simply stopped believing the story she had built. Matthew sat beside me one evening, quiet for a long time before saying that gratitude without limits turns into guilt. His voice was low, almost ashamed. I looked at the check resting on the table and folded it in half. I didn't cash it. Justice had already been paid in truth. Keeping the money would have turned closure into revenge, and I wanted peace, not victory. The kitchen smelled of garlic and warm bread as my son stood on a stool beside me, stirring the sauce with careful concentration. His cheeks were red from the heat, his small hands steady. He asked if Aunt Millie still made the lemon tartlets, and I told him she used to, but not anymore. He nodded and said, "Mine tasted better anyway," then laughed as I flicked a bit of flour onto his arm. The sound of his laughter filled the room in a way that silence never could. We set the table together, 2 plates, 1 candle, nothing fancy. I realized how different it felt to cook when it came from choice, not pressure. No one owed anyone tonight. It was just food and love, freely given. Saying no had not made my world smaller. It made it honest. Dignity, I learned, is the quietest form of freedom.